Welcome to another edition of Our City. I hope everyone enjoyed the Memorial Day weekend, and as we move past the official, unofficial start of summer, a few things going around the city of Elizabeth this week. On Thursday, May 31st at 4:30, I'm going to attend the 10th anniversary celebration of Amber Court. It's a senior citizen building located at 1155 East Jersey Street. And on Friday, June 1st at 8:30 in the morning, I'm going to join the Leaguers at their Multicultural Day event. This is held in the front of their school, located at 1189 East Broad Street. And later that morning, around 11 o'clock, I'm going to join city council members, fire officials, and guests at the swearing-in ceremony for 20 new firefighters here in the city of Elizabeth. This event will take place in council chambers located on the third floor of City Hall. Later that evening at 6:30, members of the Portuguese community will have their flag raising outside of City Hall. The Portuguese flag will be raised. Immediately follows a program and proclamation in City Council chambers. And on Saturday, June 2nd at 9:30 in the morning, the Institute of Music for Children will have their annual walk and festival located at 780 Salem Avenue. Following that, around 10 o'clock, I'm going to join 2nd Ward Councilman Nelson Gonzalez and community members for the 2nd Ward Place Street celebration. This family-friendly event, which will be held between South 5th Street and 5th Avenue, is recommended for all ages between 6 and 14. Will include a morning of games, raffles, giveaways, and more to be held on the city streets. Sponsored by myself, the City of Elizabeth, Councilman Nelson Gonzalez, and Shaping Elizabeth. For more information, please call 908-820-4051. And on Sunday, June 3rd, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to attend the Elizabeth Portugal Day Parade. The parade begins at Union Square in the city of Elizabeth, and it concludes at the Portuguese Instructive Social Club on Grove Street and Route 1 and 9, with a reviewing stand at the park near City Hall. If you need more information concerning these events or any other events, please call our Public Information Office at 908-820-4124. And please stay with us after these messages. We're going to talk about our Historical Society Forum here in the city of Elizabeth.
Sometimes you learn by helping others learn. Kane University.
Welcome back to Our City, where I'm pleased to be joined by Miss Ceil Mantia, Vice President of the Historical Society. Ceil, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
And Mr. David Tulloch, who is the Rutgers University Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You got to tell me what sensing and spatial analysis is.
They're computerized mapping that we're doing everything from GPS to use of satellite imagery and air photos to enhance mapping. And I'm also a faculty member in landscape architecture, where we're applying those to shape the landscapes.
Okay. And Ceil, you've been on the show before, but
yes.
You're retired out of Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
How many years did you put in the system?
35.
35
years.
And you've been active with the Historical Society, the Rotary Club.
I'm busier than ever. I don't know how I worked.
Well, you find all the time, right, Ceil?
Right. So but I enjoy it.
You're good. On May 24th, the Historical Society is going to partner with the City of Elizabeth, the Public Library, Public History Department, Rutgers University, the Elizabeth Board of Education, to conduct an interactive forum with Elizabeth Social Studies and students. I cannot be there this year. It's my daughter's graduation at the exact same time. Well, but I enjoyed last year's presentation.
Well, we know that we'll miss you, but we know that you need to be at your daughter's graduation.
I know. So tell us, Ceil, the Elizabeth Forum, why does the Historical Society, what's your goal to do these forums?
Well, it started about in 1999 when the Historical Society decided that we would have an annual forum to present issues that are important to the city of Elizabeth, its residents, and to also give them some information about these issues and help them understand the way that it impacts their lives, it impacts their economic welfare, and also to give the students an opportunity to understand how they can certainly do things for the future of the city. And that's why we have the annual forum. And it gives them an opportunity.
And Ceil, last year the students were really engaged.
They are engaged, and they're always engaged. And we give them questions so that they and their social studies teacher can actually do research. And then they're a little bit prepared, and that's why they get engaged so well, because they are prepared, they have some knowledge beforehand, and then they get the additional information from the panelists. And it's really a wonderful, we enjoy doing it all the time, and we really
It was
have a good
terrific
time.
last year.
Yeah.
Sorry I'm missing this year. David, the researching the history of Elizabeth, it's important today, but with all the new technology, how do you help adopt the researching of history now?
Well, the technology helps us just add more context to these pieces. And so learning about individual pieces, and in this case, they're going to be old roadways. The technology lets us add context about the areas around them and show people the connections that they made. And they make it very easy for us to contrast with some historic maps and some contemporary imagery, the changes around the Lincoln Highway, the Kings Highway, these unique corridors that connected Elizabeth with the rest of the country, how much has changed, and also in some ways how much hasn't. And so the technologies help us visualize it. They help the students see very quickly the connections locally, but they also let us see the connections across the country and the kinds of landscapes that highway crossed.
You said something very interesting about how things haven't changed.
Right.
Yeah, you have any examples of how things haven't changed? I mean, like we still have the old Kings Highway, which is called Rollway Avenue now.
Right, and which was also
that was a major thoroughfare 250 years ago.
It was, and it's still, many of the blocks in the city have stayed the same for quite a while, as opposed to the stretches when you get out to the edge of the city. It was an urban street through Elizabeth, but at the edge of town, it was suddenly out in a marshy wetland. So there's fairly dramatic change 3 miles out, but in town, it's an urban highway. So the buildings are a little bit taller, but some of them, especially
the
for the
grid is
Lincoln
very
Highway,
similar
aren't.
to
The
what
grid
it
is very
was.
similar.
So, Ceil, what specifically was involved in the preparation and the research for this forum?
Well, we did research material from the Elizabeth Public Library. We reviewed documents from the state of New Jersey, and also we looked at the books and maps that we have in our own collection at the Historical Society. So we did a lot of research.
Is there a theme this year?
Yes, the theme is transportation and the Lincoln Highway, past, present, and future. That's
Which
our
is
theme.
the old Kings,
The old Kings Highway,
the old Kings Highway,
which then became part of the Lincoln Highway became that.
which is how George Washington arrived here
Exactly.
in 1789.
Yeah, and we still have remnants of that original highway here in Elizabeth, which a lot of people don't even know about.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we have Elizabeth Avenue was part of the highway.
It's called Water Street back
That's
then,
right. That's right. And then we also had East Jersey Street and Westville Avenue, part of it. So there were little pieces that eventually got, attached to each other. But the highways were developed in pieces because locally the counties had to pay for them originally. The people that lived in the town had to pay for them. So it was done in a piecemeal fashion. But eventually they all tied up together, and we have what we have today.
So with your expertise, David, are you able to get maps from the 1700s and then compare them to the maps of today somehow with the roads?
We can bring in, they're essentially just scanned paper maps, but we can fit them to the existing landscape fairly well for those comparisons, and especially some of the mapping done by the late 1800s by George H. Cook began to really tell us a lot about what was here in a way that makes those comparisons interesting too.
So why was the information you shared, why is it important for the students to know what was going on in the 1800s or the 1700s and today?
Well, I think one of the things is it begins to show what a special place Elizabeth really is. When we begin to look at that connection that it had with the Kings Highway connecting the colonies, and this becomes a really central point that you see, not just George Washington, but anybody going anywhere passed through. And then later with the Lincoln Highway, sort of the dawn of the automobile age, it becomes a place that that's part of this advertised way to connect America east to west. This was really a promising, exciting place that people stopped along there. And I think seeing that can help them appreciate what we have now. And again, these features are hidden in plain sight. As you said, they run right through town. There are up and down the Lincoln Highway, there's still a few markers here and there even. There's some stretches in New Jersey still labeled as the Lincoln Highway.
Like the Merchants and Drovers Tavern, which became the Girl Scout.
On Westfield Avenue.
That was an old hotel rest stop, right?
Right. Stage stop.
Stage stop.
That by stage, people came by stagecoach, and that's where they stopped.
They stopped for refreshments.
For refreshments or even an evening overnight
They could stay there, right? Yeah. So, what specifically impacted you that you feel our audience should know about our city and region regarding the importance of the historic of our highways?
Well, I think, as David said, Elizabeth has always been a very important city, and even in colonial times. And I think just to recognize and understand how we were important enough to have these roads come through here to get down to the water, because so much of the transportation at that time occurred on the water. It wasn't too much, no cars were available at the time, just wagons, and a lot of the trails were not too passable when it rained or when it was bad weather. So many of the people who wanted to travel, or if you wanted to move materials and supplies, had to get down to the water. And I think that's another reason why we became important. And I feel that people don't know enough about our city. They really don't know how important it was in the past, how important it is now, and probably how important it will become and how it needs to change and grow in the future. And I think this is what we want to kind of get across to the students, that they have a real vital part to play in this as they become adults. And
so, David, have you seen this in other cities, or studied any other cities as far as the GPS and the overlay of roads? Or are you just focusing on Elizabeth?
No, we especially at Rutgers, we certainly cover New Jersey a lot, but the technology lets us reach across the country quite easily. And actually trying to map out some of the Lincoln Highway, it's really fascinating to see how much it connected Elizabeth with San Francisco and Salt Lake City in a way that cultures could suddenly move across this highway. And you think America must have been really cut up culturally when it was hard to move across. And suddenly, as we map that, it's really striking to see how easy it would have been for people and ideas to travel across.
So the Lincoln Highway connected past the New Jersey boundaries then?
Oh, it did. Lincoln Highway was the
yes.
first East Coast to West Coast highway.
It was.
it went all the
And
way to
so
the West Coast.
It wasn't trivial that it came through here. That was a really important idea at a time when car travel, even on the Lincoln Highway, was still challenging.
So we're in 2018, the forum preparation and research. It relates today in the city and region in the ways that you've just described. And in what other ways do you think this really relates to us currently?
Well, I think it opens the conversation to what else connects us across cultures now, what things connect these different landscapes in the U.S. And now that we live in a digital age, there are these parallels. Like the culture moves through the internet more than might travel through a road. But if the students begin to think about it in that way, I think they're going to see these historic highways as something really important.
And Ceil, summing up, what would you like the students to get out of this?
I think I would like to have the students understand that history is very vital, very important to understand the past as it relates to the present, because I think that's one of the things that I've always been interested in. And as a lifelong Elizabethan, I've always been interested in history and some of the sites that we have here and how well they're taken care of and how important we have been all along, as David said, not only in colonial times, but even now, and how important it is to keep the infrastructure going so that in the future we will be able to do even better with our transportation. Of course, it'll be in a different way, I'm sure, but that's what I want them to learn, and how much they can influence government and what is necessary to have this happen.
Ceil, David, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on the show. I appreciate your input. I want to thank David and Ceil for joining us on the show, and please stay with us after these messages with more guests about the historical forum in the city of Elizabeth.
We're an American original. Dependable, historic, nuanced. with all the comforts of home, even when you're just visiting. So we're celebrating for all that we've left untouched and all that we've changed. A place where the past meets the future. So consider this your invitation.
We've been celebrating here in Elizabeth for 350 years, and we're just getting started. Welcome back to our city. For the second half of the show, I'm pleased to be joined by Mr. Ken Ward, President of the Elizabeth Historical Society. Ken, welcome to the show.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And Stanley Neron, a member of the Elizabeth Board of Education and former president. Stan, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to be back.
And Sebastian Prado, a trustee of the Historical Society of Elizabeth, New Jersey, and a former governor's fellow, and a regular on the show, Sebastian. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
So I'm happy to have in the final segment of the forum, Stan, you're the moderator and facilitator of what we talked about in the first segment, right? And Ken, as the president, and Sebastian, you've been active in historical efforts here in the city. So, Stan, we'll start with you. As a member of the Board of Education, why is it important for the Elizabeth students to participate in this forum?
Well, it's really important because, you know, this is a way they start to get engaged as young people and young adults, and they start prepared for the future. You know, and it's important that they understand the history of the city, history of their society that they live in, and how to become civically engaged. And this is what we saw during the forum, how prepared they were and how engaged the students become in not only making transformative change in their community, but also how they become engaged in the process.
So Stan, last year you and I were on the dais or up front, and the students really got engaged with some questions.
Oh, they sure did, yeah. They were really engaged in knowing how to implement change and different things that they wanted to address in their community. And, you know, they were curious after hearing the wealth of knowledge that exists through the history of the city, you know, to understand where the city started and where the city's headed and how things have changed, you know, through the demographics, technology, the different industries.
And Ken, last year you gave a presentation and was very well received. So this year you're wearing a pin about the Lincoln's Highway, which was part of the first segment. Tell us about that pin, first of all.
Well, 1913 was when the idea of the Lincoln Highway was conceived, and it's actually an attempt to make a transcontinental highway. There was a lady in New Jersey that in 1909 went from New Jersey, this area, and went to San Francisco, and that's 3,500 miles away. Only 163 miles of that entire trip were paved roadway. Now, my father was only born in 1912, so if you start figuring, it isn't that long ago that we didn't have a national highway going across. Now we have an interstate highway system, and the Lincoln Highway was the concept that we should have a transcontinental road. And our presentation this year goes from the original King's Highway of 1673, and it goes right up to the Lincoln Highway of 1913. Now, of course, it took many years after that for that to be completed, the transcontinental paved highway. But if you look at historically, roads are the first thing that you have to have before you have a civilization. That's the first piece of infrastructure. And you have to realize our first roads were meant for cows and pigs to travel along from farm to farm. And, you know, it's not the 3-lane and 4-lane and 5 and 6 and 7-line highways that we're talking about. We're just talking about a path that's dry and safe. And that's how the paths started. Now, the King's Highway of 1673 was from Boston to Charleston, South Carolina. And guess what's in the exact middle of that? Elizabeth. So then there was the York Road, which
So the old King's Highway came through here?
Yes, it did. It did. It has several different squiggles in it, but essentially it's the same road that was designed in 1673. Now, the brother of King Charles, who was the fellow who was the King's Highway founder, he gave New Jersey to his brother, the Duke of York. So anytime you see New York, York Street, Old York, anything York, that's the guy. And he was given New Jersey, but New Jersey wasn't worth much without roads. And so by 1711, he had completed a road from Philadelphia right to Elizabeth Point, and that's the kickoff of the boat to New York City. So the Old York Road is really an pretty much all New Jersey road, or it can be, from Philadelphia to Elizabeth Point. Elizabeth is in the center of this colonial development period. That's 1711. We're getting 300, almost to 400 years when you start looking at this. And we have to realize that our infrastructure in Elizabeth is very, very old, and it needs constant attention and constant improvement. I think the new Gothel's Bridge would be an example of a constant improvement. But Elizabeth having roads as we had in the 1600s doesn't help if the roads don't go anywhere. And that's why the importance of the King's Highway, and later the Old York Road, and even later the Lincoln Highway.
So where's the terminus in the Lincoln? I mean, the 63 miles of the Lincoln Highway. Where's that run?
It starts at, would you believe it, Times Square. And it goes across into Newark, and that comes down through Elizabeth. And there have been several paths that went through Elizabeth. Even the Lincoln Highway Association themselves can't figure exactly what the true path is. The one I like is the one printed, and it goes right down Broad Street and makes a right under where the railroad is. I mean, where the library. They turn right at the library, and that's where you get on St. George Avenue, which was the King's Highway. And that then gets down to Philadelphia, but only 63 miles of the King's Highway is in New Jersey. But the existence of the King's Highway makes all of our other roads more valuable because they go somewhere.
Sebastian, as a young member of the Historic Society, what do you think of your role and in your presentation and how you get involved in this?
My role in the event is social media. So how do we not only share our content with the high school students that are attending the forum, but with the rest of the community. And the community has the chance to see pictures of the event through our Instagram and Twitter, that is Historical Elizabeth, New Jersey, Historical Elizabeth NJ. And they also can see the entire video of the presentation in YouTube. If they search for Historical Society of Elizabeth, New Jersey, they will be able to see the content and also learn what we are sharing.
So you're responsible for getting all that up?
Yeah.
Okay. Stanley, the students, where are they coming from this year? Has that been decided?
They're coming from all our high schools. We have 7 high schools throughout the city.
So each high school is represented?
It was represented at the forum.
Okay. And tell us what the preparation is for some of these students going into this event.
Well, they've been prepared on the material that's going to be shared at the forum. So they've been discussing with their advisors and groups as to what to expect and how to get engaged in the process. I think the unique thing is, today students seldom read maps. Because of
Does anybody read maps anymore?
Well,
I mean,
this generation seldom reads map, and I can remember a time when we read maps, and when you listen to the historical background on.
I remember when you had a Rand McNally thing in the car. Yeah. When you traveled, you got it out.
Oh yeah, you pulled out your map and you could measure the distances.
Plug the address into a computer and you go.
So from MapQuest to now Navigators to Waze to even Uber. When you look at Uber and you see the direction of a car coming to pick you up or take you where you're going, that's the only interface you have with a map. So having the students really engage in this process shows them the fundamental and the foundation where our roads and transportation system originate from, and how they can infuse what they know today and what they've interfaced with history. And it's important to know the fundamental, because we know with anything that we do, you got to know the start.
Which is fascinating, Ken, when you think about it. How did they draw maps 300 years ago?
Some of the best maps we've got were drawn by the British Army in late 1700s. And as they were losing the war, they were making great maps. And
they had to figure a way out.
Yeah, essentially, yes. And some of the best maps were done by I think it's a fellow named Hill. But he stayed after the Revolution and made maps of all these areas. His map of Elizabeth Point and the roads are wonderful maps. And the accuracy, as you probably remember the name E.J. Grassman. Sure. E.J. collected maps, and we have most of his collection. And we look at these things and we say, wow, this is pretty good map making. It's not like an Uber or a Google. But I mean, I'm fascinated looking at old roads and superimposing. That's what Sebastian does.
That's what he's doing. He's got to figure all that out.
You take a present map and you say, okay, well, where was this in that map? And that's the kind of thing that I can't do. That's why we need
young people.
Young people, because
the
I have to rely on them for that kind.
So who else is on the panel at this event on May 24th? Is it here? Is it teachers?
It's the Historical Society.
Right.
Myself, I'll be moderating, along with
Angel Estrada.
Angel Estrada, which represents the transportation for the state of New Jersey, and the Transportation Commission.
Yeah, Angel is extremely important on the issue of transportation, how the federal dollars flow through the County of Union and the City of Elizabeth. So, is there something that impresses you about this forum besides all the research you do? Is there something that impresses you about the students, or what clicks for you?
You're trying to put, in this case, 300 years of history into a presentation that goes about an hour, and it's Stan who is supposed to grab the questions that students ask or the comments and then relate to them to the subject matter. Absolutely invaluable. He somehow, they speak to him and he says, oh yeah,
he
that
always
point
thinks
goes
he's
with
invaluable.
that point.
He always thinks he's invaluable.
I don't know about the other things, but he's invaluable for that purpose.
For that purpose.
And the students relate, and then he gets them to relate to the material that's just been said, and that's what makes a forum exciting. And as you noted.
Yeah. So, what do you think, Stan? From the
Well, I
students?
think like I stated before, when you're talking about these different issues and you're bringing history to the students, sometimes history can be mundane, it can be long, it can be and you have to find a way to bridge the gap and make it relate to them, and that's why the preparation is so important, that they understand the nature of the discussion and understand the key questions to ask and really talk to the transportation division of the state of New Jersey, to talk to the Historical Society, to really pull out some information that they may be curious about, because oftentimes we make assumptions that this is the things that students may be interested in, but the students have their own interests and they have their own concerns that may be something that we didn't even think about. And we've noticed that through all the forums that we've done, that students oftentimes, there's a new wave there's a new trend that's being set. There's something that they want to know about. And, like I said, the conversation could go to Uber. It could go to Waze. It can talk about, how these things relate today and how we're making transportation more efficient in our society for them,
Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining us on the second half of the show. I look forward to hearing some reviews on the forum on May 24th.
Sure.
And thank you for all your efforts on educating the students. Thank you, Sebastian, for all that you do. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Mr. Stanley Neron, a member of the Board of Education, Mr. Ken Ward, as the president of the Elizabeth Historical Society, Sebastian Prado, as well as Ms. Ceil Mantia and David Tulloch on the first segment of the show. We'll see you next week on another edition of Our City.
Offering everything you could want from college, including a life. Kean University.